Why? Because we are going from phase by phase, right? So we are looking at requirements, design, development, testing, and then trying to connect each of those deliverables, right? We consider that as a vertical traceability. Okay. Now there's one more type of traceability. We call it as a horizontal traceability. This is vertical traceability. There's one more traceability called as horizontal traceability. Right? Now let's say there are some requirements. So to make it simple, let's say there are only 5 requirements. Okay. Now let's say these 2 requirements are dependent on this, right? Which means if this requirement changes, these functionalities also get impacted, right? So if this requirement changes, this also will change, definitely change, right? So that is what I mean by dependency, right? Again, let's say this one is also dependent on this. Okay. So this is your overall requirement structure. Now, whenever some requirement changes, right? So you need to have a mechanism to figure out what are all the dependent requirements on it, right? Otherwise, you might make changes to some requirement, and if you ignore all those dependencies, right? So there would be a big problem later. Right, so earlier it could be working, and now suddenly it's not working. Let's say let's call it as 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. Now, if you take, let's say, requirement 2 changes, right? So obviously 3 is dependent on 2, so 3 also needs to be tested and ensure that it doesn't impact or this requirement doesn't change. Right? Similarly, if 1 changes, then requirements 2 and even 3, because 3 is dependent on 2. So now if requirement 1 changes, so 2 is dependent on 1 and 3 is dependent on 2. So 3 also needs to be tested, or we need to identify the impact on 3. And 4 is also dependent on 1, so 4 also needs to be tested. Right? So if we keep these dependencies, we'll be clear. If requirement and let's say for 4 there are no dependencies, for 3 also there are no dependencies, and for 5 also there are no dependencies, right? So there is nothing dependent on them, right? So if any of these, like 3 changes, no big deal, because nothing is dependent on that. Similarly, 4 changes, no big deal. But if 1 or 2 changes, we need to ensure that we are looking at the impact of the dependent functionalities as well, right? So if you maintain this list of which all requirements are dependent on which requirements, it becomes easier for us to track the requirements, right? If anything changes or anything is impacted, you will clearly know what all I have to relook at, right? So this is called as horizontal traceability. Okay, again, a very simple thing. It will help you make your life easier at a later point. If you have some 100 requirements, and then for every change you don't have to figure out, okay, what was the impacted functionality. But if you are doing that during the requirements or during design process, it clearly tells us that this is how these requirements are impacted. Okay, so a simple concept of tracing the requirements, it's nothing but an Excel sheet with a tabular form of all the requirements, and vertical traceability is mapping deliverable from each of these phases so that you don't miss out anything, right? Otherwise there could be a chance that by the end of the system development you'll figure out that 4 requirements were not met or 10 requirements were not met. To avoid those situations, we'll do vertical traceability, and if there are any dependencies between the requirements, you list them down so that you can track your requirements easily. Okay, if anything changes, you clearly know what is the impact on the rest of the requirements. Okay, so this is broadly what traceability is about. Okay, you as a you know as a business analyst would be involved in this traceability as well, right? So again, one probable interview question. Okay, they could ask you what is traceability as a simple question, or ask about vertical traceability, horizontal traceability, right? So there could be questions on that. That's another topic where we could expect questions on it.
Thanks for watching the video. Please like, comment and subscribe for more updates.